I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, we're in the 7th week of session. You kind of have that 7th week look. I won't say what that is. Usually legislation at this point that is likely to move begins to move a little bit. But what's happening?
Well, as you say, the end of the legislative session is when everything happens. I mean, that's just the way it's always been. But this year's, a lot of things are on hold right now. And a big part of that is that the budget is in flux. The legislature is waiting to find out about healthcare funding, the negotiations with the federal government, and that's sort of put a freeze on a lot of different issues. Also, it's created some tension between the House and the Senate, and I think that's sort of playing into, bills not maybe moving, or they're kind of just waiting to see what their chips are to, in the final end game. But when you got big budget questions out there, and they are billions of dollars apart between the House and the Senate, it's kind of put everything a little bit on hold. There are a lot of bills moving, but really a lot of the big picture stuff is still sitting out there. Taken with just a little perspective, though, things do happen during the last 2 weeks of session every year. So it's a little bit too early to make any final determination about stuff.
I was walking around in the Capitol last week, and some people I respect who don't cry wolf are saying that the budget gap is so real between the House and the Senate and so wide that you may be really looking at an extended session or a special session. Do you kind of feel that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's always this drama talk about having special sessions and then things get done. But this question about federal health care funding, this is a big deal, and it's still up in the air. The feds and the State Agency for Healthcare Administration are negotiating on this issue, which is called the low-income pool. But until that gets resolved, it's going to be hard to do a budget. I was talking with a lobbyist who's very knowledgeable, and he said, if it doesn't get done, if they don't get the word from the feds this week, that it probably will not be done in time because, just has to happen to get the budget negotiations moving, to get out the door. So there is real talk about having to go overtime this year. Again, I think by the end of this week, we'll probably have a better feel for that.
Some of the rhetoric also sounds kind of personal at times.
Well, Richard Corcoran, the appropriations chairman, got up on the floor a couple weeks ago, really went after the Senate on its a proposal it has to expand health care coverage. And I'm not really sure that helped it kind of added a little fuel to the fire. I think it bruised some feelings over in the Senate. And then Governor Scott kind of piled on a little bit too, and also said he didn't like this Senate healthcare expansion proposal. And again, I think that bruised some feelings in the Senate. So yeah, I mean, there's there's tension, some personal tension too, I think, out there.
But there are some issues that really have surfaced and moved on and maybe are likely to get some traction. School testing, that's working its way to the governor's office, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most significant thing that's happened so far in session is that the House and the Senate agreed on a bill to essentially kind of scale back the emphasis or the focus on school testing. There's still going to be a lot of school standardized testing in the schools, but the emphasis on it is going to be decreased a little bit. And they're trying to, that has passed, as I said, both chambers, it's headed to the governor. This has become a very big political issue for conservatives over the last couple of years, and so they've moved pretty fast on that. The House passed a bill, sent it over to the Senate, they made some changes, sent it back to the House approved it. So that's probably the most significant bill, I think, that's passed and is headed to Governor Scott so far. There's another bill that was fairly high profile, in that it's a gun bill. Mm-hmm. It relates to people being able to carry concealed weapons during mandatory evacuations. It would apply to people who don't have concealed weapons permits. And again, this passed the Senate, went over to the House, they passed it out, and it's headed to the governor. Again, I'm not sure that's one of these real big picture issues of the session, but it has been something that people have focused on a lot. again, that's another example of a couple things that have happened.
Well, another issue, though, that related to guns that has gotten a lot of high-profile reporting has been students carrying guns on college campuses. That's run into a bit of a problem in the Senate, right?
Well, part of the challenge at this point in session is seeing which bills are not moving. And we reported last week that the Senate Judiciary Chairman, Miguel Diaz de la Portilla, said that he did not see this guns on campus bill moving. It's been very high profile. Essentially would allow people with concealed weapons permits to carry guns on campuses of state colleges and universities. Particularly became high profile after shooting at Florida State University in November. 3 people were injured. The shooter himself was killed by the police. So it became pretty high profile. But Chairman Diaz de la Portilla said that he has talked to members of the Senate and that they don't really have any great desire to move forward with that bill. The NRA is lobbying it, so I would not say it's dead, but it looks like it's in trouble. Another interesting part of that is one of the opponents of this bill is Florida State University President John Thrasher, who, as of 6 months ago, was a very influential member of the Senate. So, there's all kinds of university administrators, police that are against this bill, and that may have kind of tripped it up in the Senate.
Another bill that has gained a controversial status in the process, it's kind of just floated to the top and really been difficult to deal with for a lot of people, provides subsidies for adoption. What's that all about?
This is an issue that I don't think any of us saw before the past couple of weeks, but it started out as a bill that has been a priority of the House Speaker and the Senate President to provide subsidies to state workers who adopt children from foster care. Sounds simple enough, but in the House, an amendment was added that repealed old language in the law that banned gay adoption. So it repealed the ban on gay adoption. Now, for practical purposes, this ban had not been really enforced for, it's like 5 years because of an appeals court opinion. But it took on a lot of symbolic, this repeal took on a lot of symbolic,
luster or whatever.
Emphasis
right.
for social conservatives. And it's really created a firestorm about this adoption issue. The House passed the bill, sent it to the Senate. There was a large and emotional floor debate last week. Senator Kelly Stargell of Lakeland tried to essentially undo what the House had done. She was unsuccessful. Senator Don Gates is carrying the bill there, a very conservative guy from the Panhandle. He was arguing against, her position, which was that the gay adoption ban should stay in law. So it's become a very emotional issue. Meanwhile, the House passed a separate bill that is called the Conscience Protection Bill, which would essentially allow religiously affiliated adoption agencies to not place children with gay same-sex couples or gay people who want to adopt. And that created a firestorm. So again, this is one of these issues that's kind of bubbled up here late in the middle of the session that none of us saw coming.
Let's move to another political issue outside the legislature. The chief financial officer of the state, Jeff Atwater, was widely expected to run for the United States Senate, and he surprised a lot of people across Florida, certainly in the political community, when he announced last week that he would not seek the United States Senate seat from Florida in 2016. What are you hearing about that?
It was a big surprise to me, and I think a lot of other people. Everybody expected that he was going to run, and that he would probably go into the race at least as the Republican frontrunner. Atwater has won statewide twice. He's shown he can raise money. He has broad support, it appears at least, out amongst business people and party activists and so on. And then on Saturday he dropped that he's not running. So I think a lot of us are trying to make sense of it, not sure really what's going on, but it definitely is going to make U.S. Senate race in 2016 a little bit more wide open, I think. The Democrats have pretty much already circled the wagons, if you will, around Patrick Murphy, who's a congressman down from the Treasure Coast, that he's going to be their candidate in 2016. Republicans, though, it's more up in the air.
Well, former Speaker Will Weatherford, who has been talked about with regard to this Senate seat, simply said he was watching the Masters when all of this was being noticed in the press. I certainly was, but I'm not a candidate for the United States Senate.
Yeah, I'm not sure quite how to take that. But there are a lot of people who would like to see Will Weatherford run for higher office. He's relatively young, he's telegenic, he's very conservative, so I mean, he makes the base happy in the Republican Party. But you know, there's a lot of other names floating around out there right now. Tom Rooney, who's a congressman down from the Palm Beach County area, he's being rumored as a candidate. Carlos Lopez Cantera, who is the lieutenant governor, is being rumored as a candidate. Vern Buchanan, who's a congressman from the Sarasota area. Ron DeSantis, who's a congressman from the Northeast Florida area. So
Rick Scott?
Well, you know what?
I'm not going to push you on that.
Rick Scott is. There have been rumors for weeks, maybe months, that he wants to run for the U.S. Senate. He has said that he is going to fill out his 4 years as governor, which would put him in 2018. But I think you got to look at his schedule lately and realize he's doing a whole lot of events that look like campaign events.
Thank you, Jim. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.